Now, there are 10 out-of-school program practices that are important to foster. So I would like to just go down through the 10 and then give you some examples of my experience of working with them, what they have come up with in order to address. Now, of course, having all 10 of them is optimal, but we all know that after-school programs come in a variety of different styles and fashions. So even if you are just focusing on one or two of them, any after-school program where you focus on the health and well-being of a young person is important. Now, of course, according to the Maine After School Network, if you're doing it 10 to 15 hours a week, a young person has a better chance of achieving desired results. The more time you spend with them, the more you engage them in enriching and good quality programming, the better they're going to be. So, of course, the first is positive and sustained relationships with caring adults. So you always hear about a principal who stands at the door whenever a young person walks into a school and they say their name out loud. Any good after-school program needs to focus on recognizing the child and the child's name when he or she walks in the door. Now, I have always also found that if you say hello and a quick check-in with the parent or the caregiver or whoever shows up as the adult in charge of that young person, it's very important to engage them in a positive relationship as well. Number two is an organizational culture that focuses on the whole child. So again, it's not just education or after-school homework, but it's engaging them socially, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Young people, as we all know, when they get out of school, need to let off some steam. So if there are some activities to keep them physically engaged, to get them moving a little bit, is an important quality to put in your program. The third is engaged and varied activities. So if you have different sections, when you look at the environment that this young person is walking into, is there a quiet place for them to just retire and read and regroup if they'd like? Is there an activity table where they can sit down and do some Play-Doh or draw if they would like to? What about a snack corner? Snacks, as we all know, are very important for not only young people, but adults. And it's a great time to check in with a young person and have a conversation while you're having a snack. I have worked in after-school programs where they have highly developed activity programs. So they have a dance floor, or they have pool tables, or they have ways in which a young person can go out in the back and play for a little while before settling down to do homework. You, as the adult, as a good after-school worker, will gauge what that young person needs. It's important that if a quiet child needs a quiet place to be, that's a way in which you can provide a varied activity for that one child. But if you've got a child who's active, needs to be moving around, it probably is not a good idea to try to get them to sit quietly and do homework until he or she gets that out of his or her system. Now, the fourth are opportunities for children and youth to have input into the programs. So this can vary anywhere from an after-school program where they tell you that they would rather do an art project than to do a science project, that they give you the input so that you know what would engage them the best. In a high school that I worked with in Maine, they needed to find out why the school climate was so low, why young people were so unhappy at the end of the day. So they developed their own survey, they implemented the survey, collated the results, and came up with the solutions at the end of this process. Number 5 is you need age-appropriate volunteer opportunities in which children and youth can participate. Number 6 is engaged and involved parents and families. Many parents that I talk to feel that they're not included in their after-school program, or sometimes they don't want to be included. But many times they want to know what their child is up to. So one after-school program that I worked with actually came up with dinners once a month. So they invited the parents to come and the children to help to make the dinner. So I participated and sat down with many families with spaghetti, pizza, ice cream. It was a great way in which we could engage in a conversation with adults and children. Sometimes we would have activities on the table. So there's a game that this after-school program used to love to play called Questions in an Envelope. So in the middle of the table would be a basket or an envelope, and while we were having this meal together, the children would pull out a question. Simple questions. What game did you like to play when you were young? That he or she would ask the parent. Or, what's the music that you used to love when you were my age? And it helps to create an environment where the adult shares positive stories with their child. What do you remember? Is always a good way to start with a parent. What did you love? And in that way, it helps to foster an interest in the child and the adult. Number 7 is a program environment has staff buy-in for data and evaluation. So you don't know what's going well unless you find out. I mean, that's really data collection right there. Oftentimes when I work with people, they hate that word. They hate the word data because it feels so scientific. When in reality, many good questions create good fodder for data. It can be a focus group. It could be a quick survey or questionnaire. It could be a way in which a parent fills out a questionnaire or a form that gives feedback. You don't know what people like unless you ask them. That's data collection. It doesn't have to be overly scientific. We could always find something scientific, but you can find good answers in a focus group. Number 8 is culturally appropriate programs. Make sure that you are aware of what the cultural needs are, especially if you have immigrant population that's part of your after-school program, that you are culturally aware of what the needs are of the people that come into your program. Varied and engaging approaches to a staff training. Now, many staff will tell me that they feel bored by the kind of trainings that they receive, that they oftentimes feel like they have to take a test. When again, if we're looking at positive youth development, how do we as managers or even as staff, how do we help to engage the staff to participate? And oftentimes some of the activities or approaches that we have for young people are equally as appropriate for adults. Get their input, get them engaged, seek varied ways in which you can train adults. Again, much like young people, there may be quiet people who learn better by reading and sharing in a small group, and then there are some who literally, like me, would much rather act it out, or would much rather get up with a small group and figure it out collectively. So again, staff training needs to be as varied as the programs that young people have. And then finally, the 10th one is treatment of children and youth as individuals. And again, we pay lip service to that by saying, oh, I know my kids. I know what they want. So we covered some of that by knowing their names, knowing what they love, asking them questions, providing a space and an opportunity for them to do what they love best. Knowing each individual child is a commitment on our parts as an adult. It means and requires us to watch them, to take note of the things that they're doing. Perhaps we need to write some of that down. What are the things they like to eat? What are the things they like to do when they first come to the after-school program? What are the subjects that they like to talk about? And then body language. Their body language will begin to tell you how they're feeling. I spent a lot of time with young boys when I worked in an after-school program. For some reason, the 9 to 11-year-old boys used to come and sit with me often. And I could tell when there was something on their mind. It was the slump in the shoulder. It was the nibbling as opposed to eating with gusto. It was the softness in their voice when I knew that something was on their mind. And when we ask questions, be prepared for the answer that you get. Because I knew that if I were to ask the right question, I was going to possibly hear something that would be difficult to hear. And as an adult, we are responsible to receive the information, to treat that with care and tenderness and respect, and then get them the help that they need. And there was an example of one afternoon I was working in this after-school program, and I noticed that one of the girls, she was probably about 10 years old, was acting very quietly. She was isolating herself. She was up sitting alone on the couch. And my instinct was to want to find out what was going on, but I also knew I needed to allow time to find out what that was. So I couldn't go in to talk to her if I wasn't going to commit to the time that it would take to actually hear her out. So I decided that I would hand over the activity that I was supposed to do so that I could go speak with this young girl. And when I got there, I noticed that some of her drawings were a little disturbing. So I asked her what she was drawing. And after a few minutes, it turned out that she actually was considering killing herself. And with that, I knew that I needed to respond. And in that response, I needed to calm myself down. That was the first thing, was to find that grounded, quiet place within. Say the right words to her. I hear what you're saying. This is what I notice about your behavior. I'm concerned about you. I'm not going to leave you. We're going to work this out together. And then to get her the appropriate help that she needed. So this was a process that took most of the afternoon. So my commitment, when I went to speak to this young girl who was acting quietly and isolating herself, my commitment was to see it through to the very end. So one of the responsibilities that we have as an adult, that when we treat young people with the respect that they need, is to give them the time that they need in order to work it out. And ultimately, she got the help that she needed, and she came back into the center and is a thriving young woman today. But when I think back on that afternoon, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't asked her, if I hadn't taken that time to sit down with her and find out why she was sitting alone on the couch. So next time you notice a young person that may be in need of a conversation, be focused. Have the intention of walking all the way through with this young person. They deserve it.